what I want to tell people is that's the most dangerous thing. That false confidence is the most dangerous aspect of this. No matter what distance or circumstances that you're in, people find out very quickly that truly defending yourself with a firearm is like everything else.
Today, I'm talking with Todd Fossey, author of Beyond the Gun, the science-backed revolution in firearms and self-defense training. He's also the founder of Integrative Defense Strategies. We get into the danger of false confidence, why marksmanship alone is not self-defense, and why most training looks better in practice than it performs in reality. If you carry a firearm, teach self-defense, or take protecting yourself and your family seriously, this conversation will make you rethink how you train. I'm John Hallett. This is the John Hallett Podcast. Train more, suck less. All right, let's get into it with Todd. When you were coming up with the title, Beyond the Gun, what does that mean to you, and what are you trying to hit with that title?
There's something called a schema, and a schema is a mental model. It's an assumption, a presupposition that human beings have about just about anything. And most of the time, almost exclusively, when people think about firearms training, they're really thinking gun-centric training. And when we think about all of the things that are involved with defending yourself with a firearm, you find out there's a lot more that's happening, both with training design as well as actually defending yourself with a firearm than just the firearm. So that's where the title came from, Beyond the Gun, the science-backed revolution in firearms and self-defense training. So I really take a scientific approach to all of those topics. That way it's not subjective, right? It's not just my opinion or what I think would be cool or what I think would be a good idea. It's very, very common. I hear people say to me, well, what makes sense to me is this. And as soon as I hear somebody say what makes sense to me, I know already that they're way off course.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about your course, the science-backed info and all the data that you bring. And, it's in the book as well. It's great. That's something I greatly appreciate. I mean, I think, your course is, well worth it, just for the data that you bring to the industry and go, let's wake up here. Let's look at numbers and actual science. I think that's fantastic.
Well, we have to start with the data, right? That way we're not just being arbitrary with our approach. The data with everything, but let's just talk about the data around violent crime. What does violent crime look like to an average citizen offender when we remove the statistics of gang and drug-related warfare? What do those violent crimes look like, so that we can start to prioritize our training, and that way we can make the most out of every moment of it, right? That's what training ultimately is. It's about the economy of time.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about that and excuses, and before we went live, I believe, and prioritizing the biggest things. What's something you think gun owners should be prioritizing more so than maybe what they're doing now? If time is of an essence in your week, in your day, to get good training in, what do you think's number one?
The overwhelming majority of violent crimes for armed citizen defenders are ambushes that are happening at contact distance. And anywhere between 65% and 80% of those are going to be simple assaults and simple battery, which means that people are throwing punches and kicks and elbows and headbutts at you. They aren't necessarily lethal, or they're grabbing you, right? They aren't necessarily lethal, or you're not in immediate fear of substantial bodily harm, great bodily harm, or death. However, you're carrying a firearm on you. So if a simple assault ensues, it could very easily escalate into an aggravated assault if the aggressor sees or feels that you have a firearm on you. So being able to dominate clinch distance and be able to retain and access your weapon really needs to be a top priority, because that's where the overwhelming majority of where and what the overwhelming majority of crimes versus armed citizen defenders are going to occur.
Yeah, absolutely. I really feel like people feel like they're going to have way more distance than they're actually going to have in scenarios and in training. And what the new student brings in, they think they're going to have all sorts of time when that contact distance is extremely hard without the firearm. Never mind having that firearm in the fight. So
Yeah, well,
I
well,
think
context dictates strategy, right? So when we have a firearm on us, it changes the context. So that means that it needs to change the strategy.
yeah,
Context is what it's all about, right?
yeah, I think that was one of the bigger things when I came to you, that just all my hand-to-hand training and feeling capable, but having my eyes open to, wow, I've done a little bit of the stuff with concealed carry, but not like you have. And it just opened my eyes to how vulnerable, just, hey, you can clinch fight, you can stand up fight, you can grapple a bit and this and that. And man, you strap that gun on and it changes everything. Just just like you said.
Yeah, well, really at any distance versus anything, we're dealing with the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Where people of low ability um, are suffering from an illusory superiority, thinking that they're much better than what they are, and what's called a metacognitive inability to recognize it, meaning they don't know how bad they are. Well, and what I want to tell people is that's the most dangerous thing. That false confidence is the most dangerous aspect of this. No matter what distance or circumstances that you're in, people find out very quickly that truly defending yourself with a firearm is, like everything else, is not intuitive. Defense and fighting is not intuitive. There's a real science. There's a science and an art to it. So we need to know what those things are. We need to know what those principles are, so that we can be very fluid and adaptive, and we can employ those things successfully. Because no two violent encounters are the same. The variables are unpredictable and unrepeatable, and no two people are the same either. So it's everything that's happening within violence is transient. So we need to design our training in a way that allows us to be adaptive to those circumstances. And
Yeah, I
the
think that
overwhelming majority, when I say overwhelming, I'm talking about 99.99% of the training out there is actually, when you understand the science of it, is actually maladaptive. It's the opposite of being adaptive, because it's reductionistic as opposed to being ecological. And I know I'm using some big terms here, and maybe I can define what those terms are for the audience, but I think they can intuitively understand what I'm saying.
yeah, I think one thing that I try to remind students, more and more, after the exposure from you. I mean, we did a drill called Hollywood, like do some other things, like they react to a punch, don't just stand there. But I think when people start to train, they just don't do anything, or they attack in the same manner every time, and just trying to get them to change their attacks and do different variables to, the defender is such a good thing, because people just practice in a set pattern. And I think it's just so easy to fall into that trap unless you have good partners that kind of understand fighting a little bit and will challenge you a little bit. I think the average person really struggles with that. At least, that's a big thing I see a lot in
Yeah, a
students.
lot of that, a lot of that comes down to whoever the coach or the instructor is too, to make sure that they're designing the training environment in a way that promotes contextualized variability. And that lends into the constraint-led approach to training. When the coach is really knowledgeable, truly knowledgeable, and has true understanding with how to set up the training environment with constraints and certain affordances, that makes it almost impossible for the student to actually do the same thing over and over again. So with that way, the learner, we'll just call them that right now, the learner is exposed to that contextualized variability within specific constraints. And so that way we can isolate a very specific skill set, and we can scale that skill set in a way that's appropriate for the student or for the group.
Yeah, perfect. Well, you answered one of my questions there in your earlier. I forgot that the biggest illusion of competence in firearms training. You answered that one for me. I know it's a good softball for you, but Can someone be an excellent shooter and still be unprepared for violence?
Most definitely. If the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. One of the analogies I like to give for this is basketball. The audience at home can look up the world's greatest shooter, basketball shooter, a guy who has all these world records, and he has these sport courts set up in his house, and all he does is he can shoot thousands of shots and not miss a single shot, and like consecutively, but he can't play the game of basketball at all, right? It's a part of it of self-defense, but it's a very small part of it. And not only that, we want to do everything we can to not use our firearm or not have to discharge our firearm. Another analogy I like to give is skating and hockey, right? The
Yeah.
generic marksmanship is the equivalent of hockey, and defending yourself with a firearm is the equivalent of hockey, or is figure skating. So let me start over. Sorry. Figure skating is to marksmanship what hockey is to defending yourself with a firearm. They both happen to be on ice. They both happen to have skates on. They both happen to be in the same arena and in the same rink, but that's where it ends. And what the industry really does is they conflate in order to market themselves. So they'll call some sort of generic marksmanship that they're working on defensive, when really it's just an incredibly minuscule part of defense. It's a statistical outlier. I'm not here to say that we shouldn't practice marksmanship. We recommend that you practice marksmanship every single day, but it should only be about 10% of your total practice, because statistically, it comes down to about 10% of defensive shootings are happening at distance. They're not fluid, they're not dynamic, and they require a level of generic marksmanship, which is each one of these terms and phrases that I'm using is its own book within itself. But people are really confused. And I mean, the whole industry is confused, and that's why I wrote the book.
Yeah.
So just so the audience knows, my background is behavioral science, and I lectured at medical schools for 15 years on the topic of psychoneuroimmunology. I know a lot about this stuff. And I had a private practice as well. And a big part of my private practice for about 15 years was that as a professional human performance coach, where I worked with elite performers in all different categories all around the world. So I'm not making these things up. I know where to look. I know where the research is at. And that's why I created this. It's designed to really disrupt the industry, and hopefully in a positive way, because we're talking about a life and death topic here. So we can't just be, forgive the phrase, but we can't just be shooting from the hip.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I think a lot of people just um, gravitate towards flashy stuff, even different things in MMA or even just traditional martial arts. Like, that's super cool. You can do a jump, spinning 360 kick or whatever, but is that really translating to defend yourself in a street fight? Looks
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
effective.
Actually, MMA does. MMA translates very well to. It's a matter of teaching MMA practitioners or MMA athletes. It's a matter of teaching them the context of self-defense. And when it's the issue is really context. They don't, in general, they don't have context, but they're much better. They're much better fighters, and they have much higher fight IQ. So when they learn the context, how to apply their skills to the context of self-defense, they're at a much better advantage than just about, I would say, any other discipline by far.
Yeah, absolutely. But what gets the hits on Instagram and all that other stuff? I feel like that's the firearms industry. Like, who's getting big hits? It's something flashy and cool, and people, start thinking that's got to be the ticket. And just because it gets a lot of hits, it was a different topic, but it was on fitness. But I'm like, just because somebody got a lot of hits, it doesn't mean anything. Do they have science backed? I always, there's several people in fitness that I'll say, go check out this guy. He's got a PhD. Is he saying it? Otherwise, these influencers are just trying to influence you. It's not about any real potential
Yeah.
science. They might be right. And I think it's the same thing in the gun industry. Like, oh, that looks great. And that's, why I really like training with you is your whole background coming into teaching martial arts instructors, and that's fantastic. That is a big reason why we all stay.
The algorithms are really designed to promote the wrong thing. They
Yeah.
they really are, because they're thinking about advertising, and they're thinking about engagement. There are other countries around the world whose algorithms are very different, where
Yeah.
the other algorithms around the world are geared toward a higher level of intelligence and education, and they're geared toward things that are intellectually honest and factually accurate and semantically accurate. Whereas the algorithms in the United States they're really designed to dumb things down. I know some of the best scientists and coaches in the world I mean, literally, and their social media following is abysmal. I saw, just so happened, I've got a really small TikTok account, and it just so happened a pop up in my feed, and there was this kid who couldn't have been more than 18 or 19 years old, and I could tell he had no education, he had no training. He was extremely urban, let's put it that way. I'm not biased against urban people at all, but you could tell he had no knowledge or no experience, no education, no training whatsoever. And he had like a top 8 list to find out, to tell if somebody can actually fight or not. He had 550,000 likes, and it was extremely low production quality. F bombs every other word, N word every other word. It couldn't have been worse. It couldn't have been worse. 550,000 likes. I'm trying to translate that to how many views. It's got to be in the millions,
Yeah.
several millions, right? And that right there, and I can extrapolate that across firearms training, self-defense industry, several industries. And I really wish that people, it's really comes down to the consumer, though. Unfortunately, the consumer doesn't know any better, do they?
If this conversation is making you rethink how you train, check out ClearSky Training. We help instructors and serious students build pressure-tested self-defense skills, stronger training systems, and better problem solving under pressure. Stop collecting techniques. Start developing adaptable skills. Visit ClearSky Training. Train more, suck less.
Yeah.
And so the algorithm is actually teaching people not just what to think, but how to think. It's a big problem.
Yeah, definitely. For you, being a fighter with a gun, what's your take on that? What would you like to see somebody that's a fighter with a gun? What would you like to see them training on? Is there top, if we're talking about top whatever, top couple things that you would give people that would prepare them better to be a fighter with a gun versus just being a gunfighter, which most of the industry is out there promoting.
Well, I've already given a little bit of the data with why I say that. Our motto is, the IDS motto is, don't be a gunfighter, be a fighter with a gun. That's something that took us a long time to come up with and develop. And that's because the overwhelming majority of interactions are going to be happening at contact distance, whether they're a simple assault, an aggravated assault, whether someone has a knife or a blunt force weapon. And even at distance, when we're talking about working what we call tactical geometry or fight IQ at distance with a firearm, we still need to understand the principles of fighting, and we need to know what those things are. So no matter where we're at, what distance, what circumstances we're in, we have to be able to solve that problem. And that means that we're not just shooters, right? Now, we're not gunfighters, because that's extremely rare for people to get into volleys and gunfights, unless you're in a gang or you're a police officer or you're in a tactical unit or you're in the military. But for us, we have to, and even for them, it would be much better for them if they reprioritized and revamped their training design so they weren't just shooters, but they actually understood how to fight, and then they added the element of the gun, and then they knew how to extend those principles to the firearm itself. When we're doing it most effectively, I don't want to be too geeky here, but I'm a bit of a geek. It's a holographic concept where the big parts are in the small parts are in the big parts. Fighting is fighting is fighting is fighting, and either you have fight IQ or you don't have fight IQ. And so that's another thing that IDS came up with, right? Fight IQ for CCW, and so that's the approach that we take. It's a radically different approach because it's a principle-based approach. It's not a technique-based approach. So when we teach people the principles of fighting, they can take those principles and they can apply it to whatever variables are put before them to solve that problem. In the motor learning world, it's called a movement solution.
Awesome. I love it.
We want to look at what's going to transfer to reality, not looking good in practice, not how good can we get at a drill, but how does the training design actually transfer to reality? That's the goal.
Yeah, I love it. Love what you bring to the industry. Here might be a tougher one or challenge you a little bit. What do you think is still missing from your system? Do you feel anything incomplete that could be better that you'd like to improve on the IDS system?
Everything.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds really weird for me to say, but I'm going to say it. We operate at a completely different level than the industry is accustomed to. They have a hard time believing that we actually can do things at the level that we can do them. But that's not, to quote my mentor, Greg Nelson, good, better, best, never let it rest. It's everything. I'm not even close to satisfied. Hope I look back 20 years from now and I'm embarrassed from what I used to be doing.
Yep.
It's really, when we're talking about a life, like it's sort of like if I was a trauma surgeon, what could I improve to save life in the emergency room? Everything. Anything that I can do to dramatically improve the preservation of life, I would say, if you look back at medicine, it wasn't that long ago that we were drilling holes in the heads of the sick to let the evil spirits out. And we look and bloodletting, and we look back at what medicine was. It wasn't that long ago when that was a common practice, and we say that that's absurd now. When I look at the training paradigm, the current training paradigm today, that's what I see. That's how dated it is. My wife works in surgery. She's in surgery right now as we speak. And the difference is, well, she'll tell you this. I think you maybe heard me say this before, John. She's said to me many times, first of all, what you do is harder than what we do in the OR because we control the variables and you don't control any of the variables, right? If we make a mistake, she also says this, if we're 18 to 24 months out of date with how we've learned things and how we apply things, we'll get sued for malpractice. Well, I would say that the firearms training world is 40 or 50 years out of date. The difference is they don't get sued for malpractice if things don't go wrong. They have no skin in the game, right? And when you're dealing with an industry that's primarily led by and controlled by psychopaths, well, then that tells you all you need to know. That's not hyperbole. The audience should look up the definition of psychopaths and malignant narcissistic personality disorder and take a look at their instructors and the instructors across the industry. And 9 times out of 10, that's what the profile is going to be.
Yeah, it's tough out there, that's for sure. And it seems to sometimes even attract that type of personality.
It does attract that type of personality. It does not sometimes. We got 2 extremes in the industry. We have empaths and altruists who are in it for all the right reasons. And then we've got psychopaths and malignant narcissists who are in it for all the wrong reasons. And there's nothing in between. And well over 90% of those in the industry are on the psychopathic, malignant narcissistic side of things. I know, I've been around both sides of all of it, martial arts, self-defense, firearms at the highest levels. I know these people. I know who the good ones are, and I know who the bad ones are. And there were many, even as an expert, as a mental health professional, who fooled me for a long time. So we need to be really careful about who we're learning with. The question that the audience needs to ask themselves is this training designed to benefit me, or is it designed to benefit my instructor?
Yeah, it's a good thing for them to ponder.
That's the litmus test.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of look back. I mean, I tell my daughter different things just as a human being. Like every 5 years, I feel like I get a little bit smarter, and it goes same thing with coaching. I'm like, God, what I did 5 years ago, I'm like, God, I've come so much further than I did. I don't want to look back and go, I'm still doing the same thing. Like, you evolve and try to get better. And, I think some people just get stuck for whatever reason.
They phone it in.
It's also easy just
They
to keep
phone
doing the
it
same
in.
thing that you're good at instead of
Can
challenging yourself.
I have something here. I have something here that I'd like to read, if you don't mind,
Sure.
for the audience. I have this in my book. I think it's important that the audience understand this. It's a cognitive bias, a psychological bias. It's called system justification bias. Another term for it is called the status quo bias. And this isn't my opinion. This is real. This is real information. It's the system justification bias is the tendency to defend and bolster the status quo. Existing social, economic, and political arrangements tend to be preferred and alternatives disparaged, sometimes even at the expense of individual and collective self-interest. So even if someone or an organization knows what they're doing is largely ineffective, they won't change because of the social and economic impact that it has on them.
Yep. Yeah, we see that all over the place. Sometimes it can make you sick.
Yeah, that's what drives the industry. And as for me, I don't care. I'm only in this for one thing and one thing only, and that's to maximize the preservation of life and to raise the bar of the industry. When I say raise the bar, I mean that in a dramatic way. I'm not here to improve training design. I'm not here to improve how the industry operates. I'm here to replace it. It needs to be scrapped and replaced from the ground up. Let me just give you an example. Let me just give the audience one example of hundreds that I could come up with. And the spectrum and the continuum of training design, there are and learning environments and performance environments, there are three categories. There's the predictable learning environment and performance environment where the task that you're performing is 100% predictable. You know it's coming. There's the semi-predictable learning and performance environment. And there's the unpredictable learning and performance environment. And then I've added a fourth one, which is the dynamically unpredictable learning and performance environment. Violence is this one. Violence is dynamic and unpredictable. The industry, especially the firearms training industry, but martial arts industry and self-defense industry at large is operating over here. It's 100% predictable. And when you understand this within the science of skill acquisition and motor learning, you very quickly realize they aren't even categorized as the same skill. They're a completely different skill entirely. And again, that's the whole nother reason why I wrote the book. Our learning environments are not preparing people for real violence. I can know in 3 seconds. I can see a training design and know in 3 seconds whether or not that training is going to transfer or not. I don't care how many buzzwords people use. I don't care how well they present themselves. I don't care how charismatic they are or how well organized their class is or how well liked they are by their students or by the public. The question is their training design set up to maximize the transfer of skill to reality? And the answer 99.9 times out of 100 is no.
Yeah. Let me ask you this one as we're getting close to wrapping it up. I think you've given a lot so far, and that's one thing I've been shooting for, is trying to keep the show kind of digestible in 30 minutes time frame. I know we could go on, and I'd
Sure.
like to go further. I mean, this is your second show. I'm sure we'll have you back for a third or a fourth because the subject, I love it. But let's talk a little bit about training and how you train somebody to move, communicate, protect their family members, and make decisions simultaneously in a violent attack or potential attack. What's something you're doing that you could give people out there listening to the show that might help them improve their training?
Well, first off, let me say this. The skills in defending yourself and the skills in defending another person are not the same skills. There may be a little bit of overlap in a Venn diagram, but essentially they're very different skills. Again, context dictates strategy. It's not intuitive to defend other people, and we don't have the time to go into that. And as you know, John, that's our level 4 out of 8 levels. That's our level 4 instructor certification course. That's what that is. I have one coming up in August in Detroit, and it's something that I know a lot about. The other thing is the training design itself. I'll go through a list of things that I have written down here that the audience can kind of digest to get a feel with what I'm talking about. And I'll repeat this within this list, and you'll see I have a list of things here. But the question that we really need to ask ourselves is the training designed to look like, and are you performing your practice in a way that reflects how reality works? It's called representative task design. So that's how you need to ask what you need to ask yourself. Does your training look like what you would actually be performing in reality? Now, the industry markets itself because it knows it's an emotional button that it can push to learn how to defend your loved ones, right? Everyone wants to be able to defend their loved ones, but the reality is they're not teaching them to defend their loved ones at all. And chances are really good they're not even teaching them how to defend themselves. But let me just go through the list here. The first thing is, I always want to make sure that I'm setting the problem first. I'm not giving them the answer first. I'm not doing a demo first. I'm not prescribing an answer to a problem first, because they don't know and I don't know what they're going to be faced in reality. So we're putting the problem first so the student can learn to wayfind and struggle and optimize their struggle to figure out how to solve that problem on their own as much as possible. The next thing is what I already mentioned, representative task design, where most training must reflect how violence actually happens, not just artificial drills that's divorced from context. The next one is perception action coupling. So what that means is they're perceiving what's happening in their environment and they're coupling that to their motor skills. And what that really means is that skill development and skill application is happening simultaneously. The outdated paradigm says that skill development happens first, and then we apply the skills later. But the science doesn't support that by a long shot. And when I say that, I'm talking about 86 years of scientific research that has proven this repeatedly over and over again. So that was the next thing I already said, integrated skill development and application, and then functional focused. I'm not focused on what is most fundamental because that's arbitrary. I'm focused first on what is most functional. What does a student need to know first to keep them alive and out of jail? The next one is how relevant is it? What's the probability? A lot of the training that's happening out there, both firearms and self-defense that's happening out there, is irrelevant. It's a waste of time for you to practice it. You might be having a lot of fun, but the time that you're spending is irrelevant and it's not going to transfer, whether what you're directly working on in class or during a course or how you're doing it is irrelevant completely. It's principle based. So if I always say, like, I want to teach people to be a key maker as opposed to giving them a collection of keys. If I teach them to be a key maker, now they can solve that problem for themselves. And that's what principles are. Principles are the tools that allows them to shape their keys that they need to solve the problems. It's constraint led and it's scalable. So as I mentioned earlier, I apply the constraints and then I can scale the constraints to maximize the training. There's a real resisting opponent that's also scalable. We can have real resistance that's reflective of how it would be in reality. And then failure is feedback. We want to make sure that we're understanding that failure is a biological requirement for myelination and competence to develop and occur. So we want to celebrate failures and we want to rush to failure as quickly as we can. And then when failure happens, we want to go through the process of remediation so that we can clean up those failures at the same time. So there's a list that your audience can sink their teeth into a little bit. And I hope that they're seeing that the things that I'm talking about here, I'm not making up. I've never made them up. That's real science. And I hope that it inspires them to stick a different kind of training that will help them in reality and not this fake straw man version of reality. So I hope that they pick up the book, Beyond the Gun, the Science-Backed Revolution in Firearms and Self-Defense Training, and check out my stuff up online. And hopefully that will help them out. And if they're interested in taking another step, have them reach out to me directly on social media or email me, and I'll be able to answer their questions.
Yeah, we'll include that stuff in the show description and stuff. I think hopefully it wakes up a lot of people. I think your book, I mean, that's one thing I hope people get out of your book. I'm sure you think something similar, is that they just look at their training different and see what they can fix and change and improve on with the science, and how we as humans actually learn, not just, memorizing, a set martial arts kata, or even just a set escape, and you're doing the exact same thing and your friend's doing the exact
It's
same
actually
thing.
what you're describing is actually a different form of memory. It's a
Yeah.
declarative memory. It's not a procedural memory or an illicit memory. And those are the way that that information is encoded and accessed and performed are two completely different things. Like I said, I use the analogy of figure skating. Figure skating is declarative. It's a choreographed routine that's scored based on an arbitrary performance. And that's not what reality is. That's why I gave the analogy of hockey, right? Hockey has to be a
Yeah.
procedural memory because hockey is a violent environment. It's very dynamic and there's a lot to process. And so it's very analogous. So I think it's important that the audience starts to look at things and approach things in a different way.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Thanks a lot, Todd. We'll have you back soon, because I know we could talk more, and everything you're bringing to, the firearms industry and, the self-defense industry. I think it's fantastic, and I hope more people check out your stuff. I think you bring, just a whole world of information that in all my instructor courses were never touched on. And I thank you greatly for everything you've given me.
Thanks, John. Well, it's an honor to have you as an affiliate, and I really appreciate you having me on and the opportunity to talk about the things that I'm passionate about.
Yeah, you can tell that. That's another. It's great to see people's passion on a subject. So, Todd, you take
Thank
care,
you.
and I will talk to you soon. Thanks, my friend.
Thanks,
Take
John.
care. All right, before we wrap up, I want to leave you with something I say all the time: train more, suck less. And sometimes more directly, just suck less. When people read that shirt, they laugh, they're confused, they kind of take a second to figure it out. But honestly, that's my philosophy for life. I'm always trying to get better. I don't think I'm the best at anything. I work hard, I train hard, I try to get just a little bit better all the time. To me, train more, suck less means doing hard things on purpose. It means getting comfortable being uncomfortable. It means embracing failure, learning from it, and getting back up when things don't go your way. Because the truth is, nobody starts out good at anything. You get stronger by struggling. You get tougher by overcoming adversity. You get better by refusing to quit. So stop waiting till you feel ready. Stop looking for the perfect plan. And for the love of God, don't be a wuss. Train your body, train your mind, train your skills, and keep showing up. And if you're an instructor, coach, martial artist, or serious student looking to build real-world self-defense skills, instructor development, and pressure-tested training systems, check out ClearSky.training. That's where we're building the future of practical self-defense education. Thanks for spending your time with us today. And until next time, keep training, keep learning, and remember, train more, suck less.